Jim, thanks for being with us early this morning. So 70 of these rockets or drones from Iran intercepted by U.S. capabilities. Where would those be stationed? Fred, we have, of course, bases in Kuwait or Bahrain or Qatar. Where would we have been able to participate in this defensive system?
We have anti-missile capabilities on ships around the area. We have a number of bases in Syria, in Iraq, in Jordan, in other places. So regardless of where Iran chose to use their proxies to attack Israel, the United States was very capable of standing in support. And I think this is an amazing display of the capabilities of both of Israel to defend itself and of its allies to ensure that when this amazing barrage of missiles and drones was sent to kill Israeli citizens, it failed to do so. That's, I think, a pretty stunning development.
Jim, I think you're right. The other question that came top of mind for me while watching this was this an attack that Iran wanted to work? In that, did they throw the kitchen sink at this, or was the combination of drones, ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles something that Tehran probably would have known Israel and the United States has the capability of intercepting? Meaning, maybe Iran didn't want to escalate, but they needed to send a message to their own people that they were retaliating.
I think that's a possibility and certainly part of their calculus, Pete, but they shot so many attack weapons at Israel that they had to expect some of them to hit. So I think the idea that Israel would be able to knock down, and along with the U.S., UK, and Jordan, all of these is something that Iran would not have expected. So they were trying to cause damage, and they were trying to kill Israelis. And the fact that they didn't should send a warning back to Iran that they are far outclassed in this, but is unlikely to, because the mullahs are not rational actors, nor are the rest of the leaders of that country. So I think what comes next is going to be something that Israel feels obligated to do to show that you cannot send that many attack weapons at their people without some sort of retaliation.
Jim, Iran has reportedly sent a message to the U.S. via Switzerland, warning that its bases will be targeted if Washington backs Israel's retaliation. What do you make of that?
They do this regularly, and I think it's bluster from the Iranian leadership. The U.S. is highly unlikely to participate in anything Israel does going forward directly. Now, Biden has already said he hopes there will not be retaliation, and there are some other people making similar statements. But I don't think anyone should expect Israel to sit idly by while this kind of an attack was launched against them. So I think there's a good chance there will be some Iranian military equipment turning into smoking rubble in the short, not too distant future.
There was a report on NBC that I was reading about in our packet that we got prior to this show. The report says that the U.S., I'm assuming they're getting this from the administration, concerned that Israel will respond without thought to potential fallout. Does that sound accurate to you?
I think that's kind of a sad statement about the way the Biden administration thinks about Israel. They do nothing but think about the potential for things like this to happen and the consequences should they act. So the idea that they're doing so thoughtlessly is absurd. I think they have every right to do so, and they may refrain. This may be a situation where they say, okay, maybe we won't, but we want full, free operation to finish Hamas in Gaza and roll tanks into Rafah or anywhere else they need to do that. So it may be part of the negotiation.
Jim, back to Pete's point on how performative this might have been by Iran. The entire exercise came with a little bit of an odd runway leading to the launch. We had 2 days of warnings that there was some type of imminent attack from Iran on Israel. And then immediately after the attack, which you pointed out was in large part a failure for Iran, there's a statement from Iran's representative to the UN that the matter is now deemed concluded. In essence, they are saying, we're done. The question is, what were they trying to actually do what Pete just said, save face, and now they're washing their hands of it and saying, let's move on, and asking Israel not to escalate? Or is it the beginning of something much bigger?
I think the beginning of something much bigger was when Iran's first proxy, Hamas, launched that horrific attack on October 7th with the full agreement of the Iranian leadership. Then Iran launched the rest of their proxies, including Hezbollah shooting rockets into northern Israel, including the Houthis attacking ships and shutting down global trade in the Red Sea, and militias in Iraq and Syria attacking and killing U.S. troops. So I don't think this is, in any way, shape, or form, a singular event. This was not simply a retaliation because Israel killed some Iranian terrorists in Syria. This is part of Iran's larger thing. They may be worried now that it will escalate, but that should be a warning to them that they have overstepped by far their capability to be the dominant force in the Middle East. And this may signal the end of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
So, Jim, do you feel like things could escalate? Should we be worried about that?
Absolutely. I'm worried about it. No one in history has launched this type of a, controlled flying object attack against a nation state. This is a massive change to the type of warfare, this many drones. The fact that it was unsuccessful doesn't mean that Iran chose to do it. And I think it's time for the world, instead of the Biden administration's follow-on to Obama's cringing capitulation to Iran and sending them plane loads of cash, it's time for the free world to contemplate the idea that the mullahs have reached their expiration date and the people of Iran deserve a better government, not through direct U.S. or Israeli intervention, but that the world should at least say we no longer tolerate this regime.
Jim, how about Iran's nuclear capabilities? Because this whole situation might look different if they had the ability to wave nukes around and say, you can't do anything about this because we could use these if we had them. Do you think Israel would take a moment like this? They've covertly degraded Iran's nuclear capability for years. If they were to escalate or if they were to retaliate, do you think they would take this moment, this window, to take on Iran's nukes?
I think had a lot of these missiles and drones struck targets, killed Israeli citizens, and done more actual damage, that might have been a distinct possibility. The opportunity to go ahead and say the targets they've been looking at and been concerned about for decades now are now in play. I think this having been a pretty dismal failure as far as the Iranian ability to cause damage, they probably will not make that next step. But I think there's quite likely to be some sort of retaliation for the simple fact that the people of Israel will demand that this type of a attack get a response that tells Iran, you will not attack our country with impunity.
One more question for you, Jim. President Trump gave an interview to Maria Bartiromo, this is some time ago, where he talked about after the killing of Qasem Soleimani, he was called by Iran, or Iran proxies called him or connected with his people to say, we have to do something. And that resulted in the attack on the American base. It was largely a failure, and I think most of it fell outside of the grounds of the American air base in the Middle East. But they essentially said, we have to do something, we have to save face. I'm just curious, because we were told for 2 or 3 days ahead of time, something is coming, something is coming. Of course, intelligence could have picked that up. But do you think anything similar happened or could have happened here, with Iran calling the United States or Israel and saying, we have to do something, and here is what that something was, something that amounted, yes, you're right, an unprecedented state action, but also a failed action?
I'm almost certain that there were back-channel communications of some kind, and they basically openly said it was going to happen. So I think the same thing happened before the Biden administration retaliated for the U.S. troops that were killed. I think this has been going on for a while. The problem I see is there was no way Iran could anticipate this being such a dismal failure. So we should operate on the assumption that they expected to kill Israelis and to damage Israeli military targets. And given that, I think their failure may make them less likely to do so in the future. But given the nature of that regime, given their desire for regional hegemony and the fact that they are a nihilistic death cult, who believes that they need some sort of Armageddon-like event to bring about the Islamic rule, I don't think we should ever anticipate them to act rationally and not do these types of insane actions.
All right.
All right. Jim Hanson, thank you very much for your insight and your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
Good talking with you.
Likewise.